everyone, it's Kim from 3 Olives Branch, and today we are making this sausage stuffing. So it's a great twist on the classic stuffing with a lot of the sausage flavor. Perfect for your Thanksgiving table, and it's really easy to make. You can also make this in advance, so it's just ready to go and be warmed for your holiday dinner. So we're gonna jump into everything that you need in order to make this, as well as the steps for how to get this on your table. But first, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more holiday recipes, as well as other food that we will have coming to you in the future. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we need to do with any type of a homemade stuffing is get the bread pieces ready. I like to just do my own rather than buy the ones that are in the store, just because I know that they are not stale, but rather just dried out. So you first cut it into 1-inch thick slices and then cut them up into cubes from there. So with these larger pieces like this, I cut it into the 3. And then we turn around crosswise here to do the cubes. So something important is you don't want to like squish or push down too much on this bread, because you're going to compress it and then it's going to become more like a harder brick instead of a nice fluffy dried out piece of bread. So just kind of hold your hand here really firm, almost like a guardrail for the bread, and then saw through. So you don't want to be pushing or pressing too much, as much as you can help it, and then just get that bread cut into chunks. So we're going for about 1-inch pieces, but you really want to think about, bite-sized pieces. Sometimes you might have pieces that you want to cut up into even smaller bits, and that's completely fine. So we're just going to keep going along here. Another important thing with cutting the bread is you want to make sure you're using a serrated knife, which is a bread knife. If you use a flat knife, it's not going to go very well. It actually makes a huge difference with cutting bread. It's amazing. It'll just smush it really, rather than actually cut through. So sometimes you'll have like these weird pieces where they're not quite the right size, which of course happens. This one I'm just going to leave as is because it's not huge, but again, use your own judgment of exactly how large you want that bread piece to be. And we're going to use the butts in all of the bread. When it's smaller pieces, I tend to go down to 2 strips here instead of 3. And again, we're just going to keep the cubes going. Try to keep them roughly the same size. Like this one obviously is big, so we'll cut that guy in half. All right, so we've got all of our bread cubes here ready to go. And now we're going to take this and put this in a low warm oven, 250 degrees Fahrenheit, for it to dry out. So we're looking for it'll start to crisp up a little bit, get a little brown, but we're really not browning it like a breadcrumb or anything. We just really want it to, again, dry out so that it's nice and crunchy, so it'll absorb all the amazing flavors of the stuffing itself. I also love that this part can be done in advance, like even 2-3 days in advance. So it's a great thing to knock out early so that you have everything ready to go and make the day of the holiday even easier. So let's go ahead and get this in the oven, and then we'll keep going with the rest of the recipe. Okay, so we are about to get ready here, and we have all of our ingredients ready to go, and this is called mise en place, and this just makes it a lot easier when you're cooking to keep pace with getting everything done without having to stop and cut something or grab something. So that's why we've done this here. We have all of our little bowls and measurements and everything cut and ready to go. We already toasted our bread, and so it's all in here, and you can hear that it's nice and crispy and crunchy. So we have this ready here on standby, because as we cook, we are going to be adding to the bowl. So this skillet is going nice and hot here. And first up, we're going to cook the sausage. So the sausage that I'm using is plain ground sausage, but you can use other types if you wish. If they do have any flavoring in it, you just want to keep that in mind, because that's going to affect the flavor of not only the final recipe, but perhaps what you're adding to it. So let's say you have a sausage that has some salt in it or some pepper. You might want to skip the salt and pepper. There's even some out there with sage. Same thing, you might want to skip the sage here as well. So again, this is just plain sausage, and we're going to let this cook and brown. It's going to take a few minutes, probably about 7 to 10 or so. And then when it's done, we're going to dump it in the bread. So let's let this cook. Okay, so our sausage is done. You can see that it is cooked through. We're not really seeing any pink anymore. And then you also want to make sure that it's in small pieces. So as I've been cooking, I've been just kind of stabbing at it with the side of the spatula here. You can use anything else just to break this up and not leave them in super huge chunks, because it's really not going to break down any smaller once you get it in here. So it's a matter of preference and how big or small the chunks of sausage that you want. When you're doing the sausage, you could pick sausage that is in the casings. You would just want to remove the casings, just like cut right down the seam and dump them in here. If you wanted to use slices of sausage, like little coins, you could do that as well. So whatever sounds good. All right, so we're going to dump this into the bread bowl here and keep fat and everything. This one surprisingly didn't have too much fat in it. So it's not anything that we need to worry about. If you do feel like there's too much fat, you can take some out, but that's going to ultimately just really help our flavoring in here. So put the skillet just right back on the heat, and we are going to do our vegetables now. I choose to do the sausage first because I want that sausage flavor to transfer onto the vegetables a little bit in this sauteing method. So we're going to add our butter. It's a lot of butter, but we're making a lot of stuffing, so it's okay. And so we're gonna let this melt first before we add our vegetables into it. And that butter fat here is going to combine with any of those little bits of sausage and the sausage fat that might be still in the skillet here. And our sausage is nice and hot. Here, I'll show you. You can see it's nice and steaming, super steamy. So it's starting to melt already with that bread, so we'll leave that in there. All right. And then as our butter is melting, we're just gonna help it along here a little bit. You don't want it to brown. So if it's browning, it's too hot. You want to turn your burner down because that could start to lead towards it actually burning, which would be very bad. And the butter being browned is going to change the flavor profile as well. So we're just looking for it to keep this nice golden yellow color. And to this, we're going to add our vegetables. So I have them prepped again here, ready to go. This is a bench scraper. And I love this because it's great to cut things with, like brownies or Rice Krispie treats, but it also makes this very easy. So instead of using a knife and worrying about cutting yourself, you just slide this on the bench, which is where the name comes from, bench scraper, and scoop up the vegetables, and bam, there you go. So we're gonna get all of our onion and celery in here and get this to start cooking down. We don't want it to be brown, but we do want them to be soft, just not super mushy. They will get a little bit softer in the oven, but not too much, so we're going for just about however soft or crisp you would want it. And then during this process, we are also going to add all of our herbs as well. I like to add the herbs when something is cooking, especially like the vegetables, not only for the flavor to really permeate into the vegetables, but also when you are heating or cooking the herbs, it's going to open them up or bloom them, especially if they have an oil or a fat or some type of liquid that they're sitting in, and really enhance not only the flavor of the herb, but carry it throughout the entire dish. So I have some rosemary, thyme, and sage in here, all fresh. You can use dried if you want, but I do recommend fresh for something like this. And hopefully you'll be using these herbs in a lot of your other dishes as well, so they wouldn't necessarily go to waste. With thyme, it's very easy to trim the leaves off of this. So this rosemary and sage are just chopped, but with thyme, you want to grab it up towards the top of the stem and then just pull it down, and all the leaves are going to come off. So you can see I have some little stems in here, which is fine because these are very soft and tender, and they're not going to be hard or rough when you're eating them. So I'll just pull at them a little bit, get them in here. This main stem is going to be more woodsy or firm, and you can see it's not going to be very pleasant to eat. So we don't want to include the firm ones, but the little softer ones, or like the tops of the stems here, are completely fine. So we have those all ready to go. And again, we're going to get those in here during the party with our vegetables. And you can see they're already starting to take on some color here. And they're going to get what we call fragrant. Fragrant just means that they smell really great and they smell like exactly what they are, and that the scent's really strong compared to before they're cooked. All right, so you can see we've got some bits of sausage floating around in here, which is great. You can see that our onions and celery are starting to turn a different color. We're not going for the butter to be gone. I mean, this is extra butter in here because it's going to be going into the dish. So we're not trying to make this dry. We just want to aim for the vegetables being ready. So same thing, if you feel like they're browning too much, too fast, that means you are on too hot of a heat. And while the instructions will give you guidance on what temperature to keep it at, it's really dependent upon your oven as well. So like this is medium heat right now, but I know that my stove runs a little bit cold until you get above medium, which is strange. So I like to go just above medium to get an actual medium heat. And since I'm not stirring, you can see that it's bubbling up more, it's getting hotter, because when you're stirring, you're actually incorporating cold air, so it takes it longer to cook. So if you feel like things are not cooking fast enough, odds are you might be stirring too much. So we're gonna let this cook here for another couple minutes and then get this added to our bread as well. Okay, so I'm about happy with this because I am not a fan of mushy, soggy anything really. So this is gonna still have a little bit of texture to it, which is perfect in my book. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn the stove off because this is the last thing that we needed to cook. And now we're gonna get the rest of our ingredients into our stuffing mixture and get this ready to go for the oven. So we're gonna grab our bowl with bread here. So we're gonna take our bowl that has our sausage in here and add all of this, all of the extra butter, everything, right into the pot. And just scrape off with your spatula all those little wonderful bits. All right, scoot this over. And we have a few more ingredients to add into the stuffing. So here we are. See, it's beautiful already, amazing colors in here. It smells really good. So now we have our salt and pepper. We're gonna add this in. You could add this with the vegetables or even the pork as well. It's totally fine. Doesn't matter when that goes in because it's not gonna change anything like the herbs would. We have our stock. I like this to be not soft and mushy, kind of like I was saying earlier. So I go for it a little bit on the drier side. I use one of those condensed stocks too, which is what this yellow is. You could add more stock if you want to, if you're a fan of it being softer. And then we have our eggs. The eggs, it's not going to be like scrambled eggs. You want to make sure that they're whisked really well, but it's really just going to hold everything together and give it a little bit of texture as well. So we're using a big bowl here, as you can see, and we are just going to start mixing this up. And then after we get this fully combined, we're going to get it in a baking dish. So I'll be right back to show you that. All right, our stuffing is mixed and ready to go in our baking dish. I just coated this with some nonstick spray before I added everything in here. And the nonstick spray is going to prevent the pieces from sticking to the dish, of course, where you would lose some of the food because you can't get it out. But it's still going to give you that nice crisp crust if you are one of those people that likes the crispies. And this will just go in the oven. If you want to cover it, you can, but it's not mandatory. I've honestly seen it both ways. It's really just a matter of preference. If you cover your dish, it's going to trap a lot of the moisture in here. So it's going to keep it a little bit on the moister, wetter side. Not really wet, but just moist. And the top will not be quite as brown. If you cook it without the lid or the foil on top, then it's going to be much browner on top, and then this will also be a little bit drier throughout. So it's, again, really up to you and your preference. I like to do in the middle here where I cook a little bit with the lid on, and then I finish it off with the lid or foil off to give it that color without drying it out too much. So I'm gonna pop this in the oven, and then we're gonna pull it out later, and you'll see how it looks when it's done. So I've taken the stuffing out of the oven, and you can see that it's this beautiful golden color. You could honestly have this go even longer or take the cover off even longer if you want it darker and crisper on top, but this is exactly perfect for what I am looking for. So it's all ready to go here, and you can either keep this warm or reheat it just gently with something over it again before you have your meal itself. And then when you dig into it here, you can see that it's going to be nice and soft, but without being goopy. And it'll be perfect for any of the Thanksgiving sides and other recipes and turkey that you are making. So that is how you make this sausage stuffing. I hope you enjoyed watching. You can find the link with instructions and all of the ingredients that you need down below. And again, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel in order to see more holiday recipes and other foods that we'll be having in the future. Thanks for following along.